Here.
I have a question for Anne-Marie. I was wondering whether, well, it's sort of two questions, whether your community has a treaty claim at all with the British Columbia Treaty Commission that's somewhere in there, and also whether you have the resources or considered legal action, just because I know there is quite a history or precedent within BC and Supreme Courts of ruling in favor of First Nations, again, when there's been a problem of a private company not respecting the consent clause.
Let me take a few and then we'll answer them. Is that okay?
Okay.
The gentleman over here.
Yeah, I like both presentations, appreciated them both. A question really to Anne-Marie is, she mentioned that your First Nation did some mapping and found that your housing so it's nearer than the First Nation that Mount Milligan project. Is there anything legal that you are going to do to follow up on that? Because it seems like that seems to be a big conflict. And also, what you brought up, it seems like the First Nations need to work together. It seems like the mining companies are kind of splitting up. So if you can talk about that. Thank you.
And I'll take the lady up there.
Chairman, I want to acknowledge the Algonquin unceded territory. I'm also from the Frog Clan. I'm with I'm the Indigenous Human Rights Representative with the Canadian Union of Public Employees. So my question for you is twofold. One, I just wanted to share a comment. I really appreciated you raising the issue of protecting your daughters. I've worked in various parts of Canada and witnessed the racialized sexual violence against Indigenous women as a result of mega development, particularly in Northwest Territories. So I really appreciate you raising that as a critique of how resource extraction affects our women and our girls. My question is in terms of where did they import the workers from to work in your territory? What I witnessed in other parts of Canada where you had destructive mining practices, they imported them from different parts of the country. So I'm curious to know where did they import the workers that are working in the mine in their territory?
Do you want to go ahead?
Okay. So first question, BC treaty process. We did sign into the BC treaty process in '93 with the Carrier-Sicani Tribal Council, which we belong to. But in late '90s, maybe mid 2000, I think, our tribal chief stepped out of the process. So we don't have a treaty or anything like that. But where the discrepancy, why there is issues with the nation to the east of us is Treaty 8 boundary. The Canadian government says the Treaty 8 boundary is the Arctic watershed, which Mount Milligan would be in. The BC government is actually in court saying that the height of land, so the Rocky Mountains, is the Treaty 8 boundary. So you have two governments that don't even agree on what the boundary is. And to us, we just say, well, either way, we're still going to be in the same spot, and it's just that if we're eligible for Treaty 8 or not, you're still going to impact us. So that's why there's issues around treaty boundaries. You had asked about legal action. I think our nation, last year I had to add up for our tribe, for our chief and council how much we had spent. And we're fortunate that we have economic development that has allowed us to spend some money on fighting back on this. At that time, I think it was at $500,000 that we had spent on out of our own pockets, trying to put together legal action. The first case was against BC, and that was filed in June of 2009, right after they approved the environmental assessment, and it was due to the lack of consultation and accommodation. The problem with that case was that our neighbors filed against us, and so it was going to turn into a title fight, and we didn't want to have it First Nations in the court fighting against each other, so we withdrew that case. Then in 2010, when the federal government approved the project, again, we filed in federal court against regarding lack of consultation and accommodation on the federal process to really talk to us and to understand this process. And then a second federal case, because in 2010, just as it was approved, a month before it was approved by the federal government, Terrain Metals, which was a junior mining company out of Vancouver, sold the project to Thompson Creek Metals out of Denver, Colorado. So to have that sale happen, the minister had to approve it. The federal minister of industry, I think, had to approve it. And so they only had to consult British Columbia to see if the government agreed to it. And they didn't have to consult the First Nations that were impacted by that sale. So we felt that we could have fought that case. But in the end, our community had to, in British Columbia, have this new process called the Economic Community Development Agreements, where if there's a new mine being developed, the government offers revenue sharing, so they offer a percentage of the taxes that they're going to get from the company. And for NatGasly to take part in that, we had to agree to let go all of our court cases. Chief and Counsel felt that instead we had already had over $500,000 spent. We didn't know where the cases would go. So as of spring this year, all the cases have been dropped. So that's legal action. The second question was First Nations working together. We made every attempt to work with our neighbor. And I like going back to what our chief said. He just made a presentation in November last year saying what he learned from the process was he shouldn't have spent so much time figuring out the government process, and he shouldn't have spent so much time figuring out the industry and what the company and what they wanted. Is we should have just focused on our neighbor, and the two of us come together and put a process together and present that to the government. The ideal would have been that we work together. For a number of reasons, it just didn't happen. The vice president of the company used to be employed by the First Nation there, and so he had a lot of influence with the chief and council. And so once he became the vice president of the company, which, I mean, he was also the regional manager of mines for BC. When the project was approved, he was the regional advisor, approved the project, and then 2 weeks later went to work for the company. So there's lots of conflict, and well, I think there was lots of internal conflict of interest, but that just didn't happen. We're still, to this day, there's community members there that want to work with us, and we're still hoping that someday we could come together and try to have a better relationship. Third question, where do they import workers from? Well, just north of our area in another First Nations territory, a mine just shut down. So a lot of the workers came from there, but they were flying in from as far away as Newfoundland and Calgary and Edmonton. And the company argued, they said they were trying to hire locally. When they couldn't hire locally, they said they needed to expand their definition of local, so they expanded it to a wider range so that they didn't have to hire the people right from Fort St. James. They could bring in, and so right now the biggest business is people parking the workers' vehicles in town, in a big parkade, so that they could take a bus to go to the mine site. So they're brought from all over Canada, and 2 years ago, I remember all the hotel rooms in town were shut down, and the town was really happy about that. And they were saying economic boom in Fort St. James, you can't get a hotel. And I said, well, the only thing that proves is that none of our people are working at the mine because if there were local people, they'd have their own houses, right? They wouldn't need to be staying in hotels. So it's a lot. I think the biggest boom too is to Air Canada and WestJet out of Prince George, because they get to fly the people home. So